I realized it was time to wrap things up and leave the master control booth before someone showed up to shut me down. If I acted quickly, I could switch off the live assist mode and return the system to its fully automated broadcast mode. Our local TV audience had seen enough for the night. Once I had the system running normally again, I could leave and grab a drink. I really needed one. I also understood that there would be consequences to face. Consequences at home and from the general manager and FCC once they pieced it all together and came after me. But I was already feeling like I was in a bad situation, so I didn't care anymore. Like I said, I needed a drink. I headed to Frankie's on Roswell Road, a popular local sports bar, and ordered a beer. I sat there watching the end of the Monday night football game while having a few more beers. There was a lot of chatter in the bar, and I knew what it was about. I couldn't catch everything, but I heard enough to know I had accomplished my goal. I had stirred up conversation. Luckily, nobody pulled me into their discussions, so I drank alone in silence while witnessing the Saints dominating the Falcons. By the time 10:30 p.m. rolled around, I was feeling numb. The game had ended, and my team had lost. New Orleans 23, Atlanta 3. It seemed like the Saints were particularly motivated, perhaps because it was their first game back in their stadium since the hurricane, and they completely outplayed the Falcons. Our station aired the game alongside ESPN because we were one of the teams involved. I inquired with the bartender about leaving my car in the parking lot overnight, and he agreed it was a wise decision given my condition. Recognizing my state, he arranged for a cab since I resided just a short distance away in a pleasant residential area of Sandy Springs. So, that's pretty much the conclusion of the story, and I suppose I should begin at the start to give you a clear picture of how I ended up in this situation. My name is Richard Head, but my friends call me Dick. I work as a broadcast engineer for WBDK, a local CBS affiliate in Atlanta, Georgia. I hold a graduate degree from MIT in electrical engineering and computer science, and I also obtained a second degree in broadcast technologies. Needless to say, I'm highly qualified in my field and have held several challenging positions. I've been working in the industry for 22 years, with stints at various television stations along the East Coast, before settling in Atlanta for the past 5 years. If you're curious about my appearance, I'm 46 years old with dark hair that's graying at the temples. I've never felt the need to conceal the gray, but I do apply a bit of dye to my small mustache to keep it from showing any signs of gray. I stand at 6'3" and weigh around 190 pounds, although I haven't stepped on a scale in quite some time. I'd say I'm moderately attractive, though I wouldn't compare myself to Mel Gibson or Richard Gere. You'll notice I didn't mention any younger actors, primarily because I'm not familiar with many of their names, and also because I'm not in the same age bracket, so it wouldn't be relevant. Anyway, I consider myself good-looking, but I'm not the type you'd see in a romance novel. My wife Sharon and I have been married for 22 years, and we have 2 daughters, Melanie and Stephanie. Melanie is married, while Stephanie is a senior in college. Sharon stands around 5 inches tall, weighing no more than 135 lbs, with long blonde hair that reaches her shoulders. She's incredibly attractive, with a figure that catches attention, and she's one of the sweetest women I've ever known. It's hard to find someone who doesn't like her. For the past 18 months, Sharon has been working as a secretary for our pastor, Reverend Bob Shelter. Now, on to the story. Last Friday, I had some extra time for lunch and decided to surprise Sharon by taking her out to lunch. I parked near the side entrance of the church offices due to the rain. When I arrived, she wasn't in her office, but I decided to walk in anyway. As I stood there, I overheard Sharon speaking to Pastor Bob in his office. She mentioned how excited she was for Monday night, expressing anticipation about spending time together due to my work covering the Monday night football games. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Their conversation turned intimate, with talk of booking a room at the La Quinta Inn and expressing longing for physical intimacy. Hearing this filled me with shock, nausea, and rising anger. I knew I had to leave before I did something rash. It was a struggle to walk away, but I couldn't bring myself to confront them in that moment. Despite my desire to confront them, I feared I might act impulsively and regret it later. I slipped out the same way I came in, hoping they hadn't noticed my presence. They had security cameras, but I entered through a side door they likely didn't monitor, As I drove away, it was one of the most difficult decisions I've ever made. I was so shaken that I knew I wouldn't be productive for the rest of the day, so I called the station to let them know I wasn't feeling well and would be heading home. I needed time to gather my thoughts, and home seemed like the best place for that. Sharon wouldn't be home until after 4 p.m., so I had plenty of time to contemplate. It was evident that Sharon was having an affair with Pastor Bob. I decided he would no longer be my pastor. In my mind, he became Bastard Bob, a fitting alteration. I needed to understand the extent of their relationship, how long it had been going on, and why it had started. While some people might prefer not to know these details, I was not one of them. I desperately wanted to understand why this had happened in my seemingly wonderful marriage. Clearly, Sharon didn't view our marriage as I did, and she wasn't the person I thought she was. I resolved to uncover everything I needed to know and address the situation head-on. I wasn't weak, and I would handle both of them accordingly. Once home, I brewed a pot of coffee and sat on the patio to gather my thoughts. The pleasant weather and fresh air helped me clear my mind as I contemplated the situation. I knew I would eventually figure it all out. I just needed to calm myself. I won't deny shedding a few tears that afternoon. While I understood that I didn't own Sharon or her body, it was devastating to think she would be intimate with another man, or men, after vowing herself to me on our wedding day. While some might not take those vows seriously, I certainly did, and I believed she did too. Experiencing something like that prompts you to question your entire set of values and wonder if you've been naive your whole life to believe in fidelity and love, along with all that accompanies it. The most damaging aspect of having a cheating partner isn't just the act of infidelity itself. It's the loss of belief in them and everything they say or do. You lose trust in them, the very foundation of your marriage, leaving you feeling exposed and afraid. Despite being 6'3" tall and weighing 190 pounds, I felt vulnerable and scared. It highlights how severely a cheating spouse can affect someone, knocking them down like nothing else could. As I sat there grappling with my emotions, striving to remain composed and rational so I could process everything, I realized there were past doubts I had dismissed due to my trust in Sharon. These seemingly insignificant issues, now accumulated, formed a heavy weight in the pit of my stomach as I pieced it all together. How could I have been so blind? Trust, that's how. I had placed my trust in her. Today that trust was shattered, and all those minor clues had merged into a burden that would be hard to bear. I needed facts. That's what I craved. I wanted to understand why this happened, how long it had been going on, how frequent it was, where it took place, and who else was involved. My trust was obliterated, but I was determined to uncover the answers I needed. I realized my marriage was a facade, and I would confront that reality. But first, I needed clarity. Unwilling to face Sharon yet without revealing my suspicions, I left the house at 3 p.m. to avoid being there when she returned. I drove into town, stopped at the station to gather some essentials for the next few days, and briefly spoke with my boss about needing time off early in the week to deal with personal matters. He seemed understanding, so I headed to Frankie's to pass the time until I had to return home. At 5 p.m., I called Sharon to let her know I'd be stopping somewhere for a while and wouldn't be home for dinner. She expressed annoyance, mentioning she was feeling aroused and had plans for the evening, but if I stopped, those plans would be off the table. Yeah, like I'd want that aroused state caused by Bastard Bob. She might be in the mood, but it's because of him, not me. She can satisfy herself for all I care. I told her, "Sweetheart, I've already planned to stop by, so just stay excited for me, and I'll take care of you when I get back." I knew that would stir her up. She replied, "Don't count on it, pal. If you think you can treat me like that, you won't be getting any action for a while." To myself, I thought that's exactly what I wanted. I wasn't going to touch her again until I found out what was going on, and maybe never again. I arrived home around 10:30 p.m., pretty drunk, but not too drunk to notice the bedroom door locked. I smirked and banged on the door, figuring she was awake. I shouted, "Fine, if that's how you want it, don't expect me to tend to your needs. Just suffer." Then I headed for the spare bedroom, knowing she'd be furious. It would give me a break from explaining why I didn't want to be intimate with her. The next morning, she was sitting at the kitchen table with coffee when I walked in. I could feel the chill in the air as her stare pierced me. If I hadn't known about her infidelity, her look would have sent shivers down my spine. I grinned at her and said, "No need to get up and make breakfast, honey. I'll grab something on my way to golf." I left through the kitchen door, tossed my clubs in the trunk, and drove off. Shortly after, my phone rang. Seeing it was her, I ignored it. A few minutes later, I checked the message. She was furious. "You jerk! How could you do this to me? Get back here right now." Bastard? No, that was Bastard Bob, not me. If anyone deserved that title, it was him, not me. I had no intention of golfing. It just bought me some time. Instead, I drove straight to my former church. Did you think I'd ever want to hear Bastard Bob preach again? It was still early, so I knew no one would be around, and I was right. I entered the building. Yes, we had a key because my wife worked there, and headed straight to the offices. My objective was to install remote micro cameras and mini microphones in her office and in Bastard Bob's office. It didn't take long to accomplish, and I concealed the transmitter behind old hymnals in the supply closet across the hall. The receiver was wired into my car's electrical system, enabling me to monitor their conversations and activities whenever they were in their offices. While I didn't expect much activity at the church, I was confident that observing them and listening to their conversations for a few days would yield valuable information. After ensuring everything was functioning correctly, I searched through her desk but found nothing noteworthy. However, I noticed a significant asterisk on her calendar for Monday, aligning with what I had overheard on Friday. I prepared accordingly. Next, I investigated Bastard Bob's office, but had little success finding incriminating evidence until a last-minute revelation struck me. Inspired by my surroundings, after all, I was in a church, I searched through filing cabinets for receipts of church expenditures. Sure enough, I discovered a file containing receipts for the La Quinta Inn in Roswell. Some were from late 2005, and others from the spring of 2006. Aware that I was pushing my luck by lingering, I quickly made copies of the receipts and restored everything to its original state before leaving. I drove to the golf course, parked in my usual spot, and entered the clubhouse to ensure my presence was noted. I settled at a table, nursing a Sprite for a couple of hours, scrutinizing the bills. I realized that the two from late 2005 were both on Mondays, coinciding with dates when I attended a conference at CBS headquarters in New York. What infuriated me the most was Bastard Bob's audacity to charge those rooms to the church under the label of conference room rental for meetings. He was having an affair with my wife in a motel, and I had unknowingly footed the bill. Though we had contributed to the church financially, I vowed not to contribute any longer. Their situation was dire now. With just a bit more evidence, their fate would be sealed. I was certain this had been ongoing for nearly a year, if not longer, aligning with suspicions I had entertained earlier. My hunch was that Bastard Bob had been involved with her even before she started working for him. Initially, she held a good position at the Telfor Corporation as a receptionist. However, she eagerly embraced the opportunity to work for the church, citing its proximity to home and her desire to serve. She claimed the pay was comparable to her previous job, but it was evident she was more enticed by the extra perks. My anger was escalating by the minute. I couldn't fathom how naive I had been. It infuriated me, but it also sickened me to realize that the woman I had cherished throughout our marriage could betray me without a second thought. I was determined to make them pay. Feeling it was time to delve deeper into my investigation, I retrieved my iPod from the car and tuned it to pick up the frequency of the receiver I had placed in the trunk. As I scrolled through the data, I watched as Bastard Bob made his way into his office and dialed a number. I regretted not bugging his phone directly, realizing I would only hear one side of the conversation, but decided it was better than nothing. I listened in as Bob spoke. "Yes, Sharon, I'm at the church. I came right after you called. What's troubling you so much?" There was a pause, presumably for Sharon's reply, which I couldn't hear. Bob continued, querying, "Oh really? Has he done that before?" Another pause followed, allowing Sharon to respond. Bob pressed on, "I see. What do you think triggered his reaction?" Yet another pause indicated Sharon's explanation. Bob seemed concerned. "You don't suppose he's suspicious of us, do you, Sharon?" After a pause, Bob chuckled. "All right, well, you can get back at him on Monday night." He then hung up the phone and sat in deep thought. Just before I turned off the receiver, I caught him muttering something under his breath. I made sure to record that muttering, thinking it might be useful later. With the transmission ended, I headed home, anticipating a frosty reception. Upon arrival, I busied myself with chores, mowing the lawn and cleaning the basement, in an attempt to ease the tension. My wife, Sharon, was silent when I entered, but the air was thick with unspoken words. At dinner, Sharon couldn't hold back any longer. "Dick, what's going on with you lately? Why have you been acting this way?" I retorted, "Sharon, considering you locked me out of our bedroom last night, I think you should be pondering your actions. It's rare for me to go out with the guys, and the one time I do, you explode. This situation is on you." Her frustration boiled over. "Damn you," she snapped. I met her anger calmly. "Is that how a devout Christian woman should speak? Your actions hardly reflect your professed beliefs." Oh my goodness, her expression was unmistakable. Guilt was plastered all over her face so thickly that anyone seeing her would have known she was unfaithful. How she could have believed I wouldn't notice, I don't understand. I'll admit, though, she did manage to recover smoothly and eventually excused herself from the table. But I couldn't help thinking, when I reveal the truth, her recovery won't be so graceful. Later, she entered the family room where I was watching television. Confidentially, it was Fox News, attempting to find balanced news coverage. Her eyes seemed a bit swollen, suggesting she might have shed some tears. The remainder of the evening proceeded without any major incident, and when I was ready for bed, I simply walked down the hall to the spare bedroom and turned in. A few minutes later, she entered the room and stood there. "What's the matter?" I inquired. "Aren't you going to join me in bed?" she asked. "Nope, you made it clear that intimacy wasn't on the agenda, so I might as well sleep alone and get a good night's rest," I replied. With that, she hurriedly left the room in tears. Frankly, I felt indifferent. Sunday morning, she woke me at 8 a.m., dressed for church, and asked if I intended to join her. I responded, "No, I'm staying home today. You go ahead and be the model church lady, and I'll enjoy a relaxing day here." Once again, I noticed that familiar expression on her face. I sensed she was starting to grasp the situation, but she managed to compose herself once more. However, this time, as she turned and left the room, I thought I detected a hint of sadness in her eyes. A while later, I heard her car drive off. Later, she attempted to initiate a conversation, but I brushed her off, insisting she leave me alone. That concluded the day, and we both retreated to our separate spaces. Monday morning, I left the house without encountering or speaking to her. As I was leaving, my phone rang, and tearfully, she apologized, expressing her love and lamenting the situation. "We'll discuss everything when I return home tonight," I replied before ending the call. I informed my boss that I would still be off for the day, but would handle the Monday night football game as planned. He was pleased with my availability and inquired about my well-being, to which I responded with a generic, "as good as can be expected." My next destination was the La Quinta Inn in Roswell. At the lobby, I approached a young man named Kevin, who was stationed behind the check-in desk. I explained my situation candidly, stating that I suspected my wife of infidelity and that she would likely be at the motel that night with another man. Despite his initial skepticism, I offered him a deal. If he allowed me to place a microphone in the room to record their conversation, I would provide him with a couple of tickets to the next Falcons game. He negotiated for 4 tickets, which I agreed to, knowing I had access to them through the station. Eventually, he handed me the key to the only whirlpool suite available. He was unaware that I planned not only to install a couple of mini microphones, but also to position a pair of micro cameras, much like the ones I had set up in the church offices. Additionally, I inserted a bug into the phone line to capture both sides of their conversations. After setting everything up, I conducted a test to ensure the transmission was clear, and the views from both the whirlpool and the bed were satisfactory. Confident in the setup, I confirmed that the devices were discreetly hidden and exited the room. On my way out, I returned the key to Kevin at the front desk and handed him the tickets for next week's game as promised. "Thanks, Kevin. I hope this all goes smoothly. Enjoy the game." With ample time to spare, I attended to several tasks I needed to address. I visited our bank and obtained cashier's checks for half of the funds from both our checking and savings accounts. I then proceeded to cancel our joint credit cards. Following that, I contacted my broker and arranged a meeting shortly after lunch to make adjustments to our investment accounts. He assured me everything would be prepared by the time I arrived. Next, I reached out to my attorney to discuss divorce proceedings and other related matters. We scheduled an appointment for later that afternoon when he would be available to meet with me. Finally, I drove to Planters National Bank in Marietta, Georgia, where I opened new accounts solely in my name and deposited the cashier's checks. I went for lunch in Marietta, although I had little appetite. Afterward, I drove to my broker's office to review the documents he had prepared. Essentially, they divided our investment portfolio equally, avoiding the need to sell assets and incur unnecessary tax liabilities. All that remained was for both Sharon and me to sign the papers. Taking the documents with me, I proceeded to meet my attorney. We discussed the divorce papers he had drafted. I agreed to pursue a no-fault divorce, proposing an equal split of assets if Sharon signed them promptly. However, in case she hesitated, I instructed him to include a provision for filing on grounds of adultery. I felt confident she would sign without delay. With everything arranged, all I needed was a quick dinner before heading to the station for the Monday Night Football broadcast. After leaving the attorney's office, I switched my cell phone back on and found a couple of messages from Sharon. In her messages, she expressed concern about my behavior and urged me to return home to discuss it before the game. Reading her messages, I couldn't help but feel a mix of anger and disbelief. Despite knowing her plans for the evening, she still reached out with words of love and worry. It dawned on me that I had been incredibly naive to love and trust her so completely. I had made a decision. The only chance of salvaging our marriage was if she didn't show up at the motel tonight. If she chose not to go, it would indicate that she cared enough to try to fix things, recognizing the trouble our marriage was in. At 8 p.m., I engaged the automated system for the evening's broadcast, which meant Monday Night Football was on the air. Concurrently, I prepared to monitor my setup in the motel room remotely. At exactly 8:15, Bob entered the room and made a phone call. "Hey, I've arrived. Can you come over as soon as possible?" he spoke into the phone. "I'll be there shortly," came the reply. After the call ended, he murmured something else, which I noted to review later for details. This could be the end of my marriage, I mused, though I doubted any change in our situation. The pain was real, fueling my resolve for some form of retribution. I went through my list of contacts, reaching out to each one. It took some time, but eventually, I contacted everyone necessary. By that time, Sharon had made it to the motel, so I turned my attention back to the surveillance. Their conversation was deeply personal and intimate, highlighting the complexity and secrecy of their relationship. The depth of their involvement was clear, and the situation was far from what anyone would have expected, especially given their public personas. Listening to them, I felt a mix of emotions. The discovery was shocking, especially considering their roles in the community. It was a moment of realization about the extent of their actions and the implications for all involved. I felt sick. My wife, a pastor, and a church secretary sinking into such depravity. In the moments that followed, I realized just how twisted they were. What they were about to receive tonight, they deserved. They deserved it all. She was on the bed in a compromising position, her posture suggesting readiness for an intimate encounter. The camera caught every detail, including the anticipation visible on her face, just before their interaction became more physical. Her exclamations were filled with mixed emotions, passion, and surprise as she engaged in the moment. "Oh, this is intense," she might have said, her voice reflecting the depth of their engagement. "This is what I needed," she added, affirming her consent and participation. He responded with boldness, perhaps too caught up in the moment. "This will be unforgettable," he claimed, omitting any crass references to me. Her responses to his actions were vocal, a series of sounds that conveyed her intense experience. "Continue. This is what I want," she urged, signaling her nearing peak of emotion. His final movements were decisive, marking a moment of closure for them, a moment that symbolized the end of one chapter for me and the beginning of another, filled with pain and the drive for retribution. After a moment, the scene shifted, showing a continuation of their engagement with renewed energy. Her reactions were vocal and repetitive, indicating the intensity of her experience. It was clear that what transpired was beyond my ability to comprehend fully or match. Her satisfaction was something I could never provide in the way he could. This realization was crushing, highlighting a disparity in our desires and capacities. The performance continued beyond what I could bear to witness. As they paused, presumably for a break, the reality of their connection, and my exclusion from it, sank in deeper. Choosing to act, I switched the broadcast to a mode that would reveal their actions to a wider audience, a decision driven by a mix of hurt and a desire for vindication. As the phone started to ring, signaling the beginning of the fallout, I steeled myself against the incoming storm, ready to face the consequences of exposing a hidden truth. I dialed Sharon's number, my heart pounding as the dial tone echoed through the silent room. On the other end, I could almost picture her, glancing at the caller ID with a dismissive smirk. "It's Dick," Sharon said, presumably to Bob, her voice laced with defiance. "This time I'm not answering. Let's see how he likes that. Keep going, honey, while he's on the line." Frustrated, I disconnected and tried again, my determination growing. This time, Sharon seemed to reconsider, her voice barely audible as she decided, "Guess I better take it," before she fumbled for her phone. "Hello, Dick," she answered, her tone cold and unwelcoming. "Sharon, where are you? What are you up to?" I pressed, seeking any hint of truth in her voice. "I decided to go shopping since you didn't call earlier. Now I'm just grabbing a bite before heading home," she lied smoothly, her words a sharp contrast to the reality I knew. "Shopping at this hour?" I pushed further, skepticism coloring my tone. "Yeah, and I plan to splurge," she shot back, defiance in her voice. "Fantastic, Sharon. Thanks for being such a wonderful wife," I replied, the sarcasm in my voice barely masking the pain. "Don't talk to me like that, you jerk. I don't know what's gotten into you. Goodbye," she snapped, ending the call with a finality that stung. As I pondered their continuing betrayal, a plan formed in my mind. I decided to interrupt their tryst, not with another direct call to Sharon, knowing she wouldn't answer, but by calling the motel directly. "Kevin, it's Dick. Watching Monday Night Football? No? Well, you might want to start. Could you ring the Whirlpool suite for me?" I asked, masking my turmoil with casual conversation. After a brief pause, Bob's voice came through. "Hey, what do you want, Dick?" It was my turn to confront them. "Bastard Bob, let me speak to Sharon, will you?" I demanded, a calm facade over my boiling anger. Sharon's confused voice then joined. "Dick, why are you calling here?" "Sharon, I know everything. The cheating, the lies. I'm filing for divorce and you're getting out. And Bob, you're not getting off easy either," I declared, my voice steady with resolve. "What's wrong with you, Dick? I can't understand you lately," she retorted, her confusion feigned. "It's over, Sharon. Maybe you should tune into Monday Night Football for a change. Enjoy the show." "Goodbye," I said, hanging up, my decision final and my heart heavy with the weight of ending. On the live monitor, I watched her switch on the TV and witnessed the shocking video of her and Bastard Bob. With a delayed reaction, she saw what the entire Atlanta area had witnessed. "Oh no, oh no, oh no," she repeated as she hastily dressed and fled the room. Bastard Bob was eager to leave, cursing all the while. "I will destroy that son of a witch," he muttered. Bastard Bob should watch what he mumbles. It could come back to haunt him. Once they left, I powered down the monitors and let the video play to the end. Then, I switched off the live assist mode and returned the system to fully automated broadcast mode. Grabbing the tape, I left the broadcast booth, likely for the last time, taking a few personal items from my desk. Now, you're caught up. I spent the rest of the night at Frankie's, and yes, my halftime show was the hot topic. After the game, I hailed a cab home. Sharon was sitting in the darkened living room when I arrived, the phone off the hook, tears evident. She wept profusely, but I was indifferent. It was over for me. "How could you do this to me, Dick?" she sobbed. "After all these years together, how?" "No, Sharon," I countered. "The real question is, how could you do this to me?" "I'm drunk. I'm going to bed. We'll talk tomorrow," she said. She remained on the sofa the next morning, looking exhausted. It seemed she hadn't slept, but again, I didn't care. She brought this upon herself. I replaced the phone on the hook, and it immediately began to ring. For the next hour and a half, I fielded calls from family, friends, church members, my former boss, and both of my daughters. They were deeply disturbed by what they witnessed, and nothing I said could soothe them. I understood it was harsh for them to witness, but they're adults and will eventually overcome it. Mrs. Bastard Bob called too, inquiring if I had a tape of the incident. I assured her I kept a copy in safekeeping and would provide it if needed. Clearly, everyone I contacted had seen the Monday Night Football halftime show. Some were upset due to its explicit content, while others, like her parents, criticized me for exposing her. However, most were supportive and empathetic, recognizing the difficulty of the situation. It was a challenging experience, but a consequence I had to face for my actions. Sharon remained tearful throughout. Eventually, I left the phone off the hook and made myself coffee. Returning, I offered her some and presented the divorce papers and investment documents for her to sign. "I'm filing for divorce, Sharon," I said firmly. "After what I discovered and saw last night, it's clear to me that you've been unfaithful for quite some time. I can't stay in this marriage knowing that. The documents I've prepared are for a no-fault divorce, and I'm proposing we split everything equally. I need you to sign the divorce papers and the agreement on how we'll divide our investments today. There's no room for negotiation on this. The terms I've offered are more than fair. You have until 5 p.m. today to get legal advice and agree to my terms. If you don't, after 5:01 p.m., I'll proceed with filing for divorce on grounds of adultery and aim for a division of property that reflects our individual contributions and earnings, which would largely benefit me. This is your best option. I want to make it clear that contesting this by alleging adultery would be unwise. It will become public knowledge in Atlanta, and you'll be seen for what you've done with Bob. You need to consider this carefully. Sharon, take this offer. It's the best way forward for both of us." "Dick, I still love you. I want to fix our marriage. Can't we try to work things out?" Sharon pleaded. "The problem isn't about love. It's about your choices and actions. You've put someone else before our marriage, and I can't overlook that. You need to sort this out and talk to your lawyer as soon as possible." After some time, Sharon came back with the documents signed. "My lawyer reviewed everything and agrees that your offer is fair under the circumstances," she informed me, her voice carrying a mix of resignation and hope. "Dick, is there any chance we could talk? I'd like to explain my side and see if there's any possibility for us to reconcile," she added, looking for a glimmer of hope. I decided to hear her out, curious about her reasoning and whether this was an isolated incident or indicative of deeper issues in our relationship. We sat at the kitchen table, and she recounted everything to me. There were no others involved. It began shortly before she started working for Bastard Bob. She admitted she didn't know why, as she was content with me, but something about Bastard Bob attracted her, perhaps his charisma. She believed he loved her. I acknowledged his charisma, but shattered her illusion when I played back 2 sound bites I'd saved of him. The first was from that initial day. "That idiotic woman better keep her affair with me hidden from her husband. Despite her sweet and willing nature, she'll be gone soon. It was easy to seduce her, but she needs to go." The second was from just before her arrival. "I'll ravage her tonight and fire her tomorrow. If she protests, I'll threaten to expose her to Dick. I can't risk him finding out." So Sharon, you not only wrecked our marriage but misjudged Bastard Bob's feelings. To him, you were just a toy, a demeaned witch. I saw how he treated you and how you enjoyed it. I never satisfied you like that because I saw you as a loving wife, not a witch. There's no way I can stay married to you. You violated our vows, and I can't ignore that. Plus, you'd never be content with me again. No matter our love, we can't overcome the damage you caused." She remained seated, tears flowing, acknowledging the truth in my words. Eventually, she signed both sets of papers. I informed her I'd be relocating, offering her time to find new accommodations. Financially, I doubted she could maintain the house, and I had no desire to reside there amidst countless memories. Thus, our agreement stipulated the house's sale, with proceeds split equally like our other assets. After collecting my papers and pre-packed bags, I departed, dropping off documents at my broker's before settling in a hotel for the night. The following day, I met with my attorney, who promptly filed the divorce papers with the county's Superior Court. We also addressed my legal woes at the station and with the FCC. He outlined potential consequences, including hefty fines and career repercussions. While jail seemed unlikely, significant financial penalties loomed, signaling an end to my broadcasting career. Within days, repercussions materialized. FCC served me, initiating a legal battle that would drain my savings, amounting to nearly a year's salary. Even worse, my broadcast license got revoked, barring me from my profession for 2 years. The silver lining, however, came from TT, who, despite the illegal and spiteful nature of my actions, offered me a job with responsibilities that complied with FCC restrictions. It turned out TT had sympathy for me, likely influenced by his own bitter divorce experience with Henry's daughter and Peter's sister. I found some appreciation for TT in that regard. Bastard Bob confronted me once at Frankie's, seemingly ready for a physical altercation. However, I ended up pinning him down, asserting my dominance. "Now, Bastard Bob, I don't want to hear from you again. Is that clear?" I asserted. His response? "Forget you." Perhaps he needed another reminder, so I nudged him in the ribs. "Bastard Bob, I have an audio recording of you threatening me. If I take it to the police, I could get a restraining order against you and press assault charges. With that evidence, you might end up in prison. Is that what you want?" I questioned. He shook his head in refusal. As I delivered one final kick for good measure, I remarked, "Well, I suppose this marks the end of our conversation. Although he's no longer a pastor, he's still the same despicable person. He got ousted from the church, and his ordination was revoked by the denomination. Last I heard, he found employment at a city travel agency. Despite his charisma, he'll need to make ends meet, especially since his wife successfully sued him for divorce on grounds of adultery, resulting in a substantial settlement against him. My incriminating tape likely played a significant role in her victory, despite its questionable legality. I'm moving forward with my life. While it's not perfect, I'm discovering ways to find happiness. I've casually dated a few women in recent months, but haven't committed to any serious relationships. I've abstained from sexual activity because I believe in reserving it for marriage, steadfast in my values even if others disagree. When I encounter the right partner, I'll marry her, and together we'll experience the joys of intimacy as intended. I'm patient, confident that the right person will come along in due time, and I'm willing to wait until then. I occasionally encounter Sharon at events like Stephanie's college graduation and Melanie's baby's baptism. While I maintain civility, I've made it clear that my presence isn't for her benefit. I'm not interested in friendship or any form of connection. It's evident that she's not content. I can sense her emotional turmoil stemming from our breakup, and she likely regrets her actions. However, her regret doesn't change the fact that she betrayed our marriage by becoming involved with another man. While some might forgive such transgressions, my moral code is firm, leaving little room for leniency. She'll have to live with the knowledge that she sacrificed a life with me for her affair with Bastard Bob. Despite my profound love for her, she discarded it all. Moreover, her involvement in the infamous Monday Night Football incident has tarnished her reputation irreparably. Everyone who witnessed it now views her as promiscuous. I've heard she receives numerous date offers, but to her credit, she hasn't accepted any. It must be agonizing to know that most of these men view her as nothing more than a conquest. It's not a dignified way to navigate life, but it's a consequence of her actions. She brought it upon herself.